They've heard that. That's not the case. They think that they have a better market over there. We meet with developers and they say, I don't know your market. I don't know what my price point would be. And we have to give them that information. When you have established economies, they don't have to dig for that information. But here, nobody is marketing their own neighborhood and saying Goche is the place to live. We have low taxes. We have people who are higher educated than the rest of the coast because we have a community college right in our town, and we have families who are growing our future generations. Does this make sense? And so I want to make sure that we know our story, because I love your story. It hooked me, and it hooked my directors. In 1986, you incorporated. You did it as a defensive measure against the city of Pascagoula. You didn't know what you wanted to be. You didn't want to be that. You were learning what it was to be a city. You were getting your feet underneath you. You are one of only 6 cities in the whole state to have a council manager form of government, which, by the way, is by far the most prevalent nationwide. You want to know why? Because it's extremely business friendly. A council manager form of government is performance oriented. If you have a strong mayor form of government and you elect someone and they turn out to be a dud, you're stuck. I serve at the will and pleasure of my mayor and council. Employees report to their supervisors report to their directors, the directors report to me, I report to the mayor and council. And if they tell me, Samantha, you need to implement this comprehensive plan and you need to keep us within the budget we have, and I decide that we need to look like Key Largo, guess what's going to happen? And that's being accountable to the people, right? And so my contract is good for 4 years. And at 4 years, they can extend it or they cannot. And as a former economic developer, that's performance-oriented management, right? And we should be proud of that in the city of Goche. But from 86, right, for the next, I would say, 15 years, you're getting your feet underneath you. You're learning what it is to have that form of government. It shouldn't be a surprise to you. It would happen if you were here, if you're in Diamond Head, if you're in Sierra Leone, if you're in India. As a new community, you're learning how to behave. But something happened in 2002. And it was gutsy. And I talked with Lou before the meeting, and not everybody agrees with it to this day. But I'll tell you what it did. It showed grit. Because in 2002, the council recognized in order for us to grow and be more than just the city that wasn't Pascagoula, we need to do a land grab and grab the interstate. Because the interstate we have will never grow because under the Endangered Species Act, right? Federal government came in and grabbed that interstate. And so they did a land grab, and when they did that land grab for high and dry land, they doubled the land size of the city in 2002. That takes grit. 2004, the ink is barely dry on the paper. 2005, what happens? You just were a city just yesterday. 86, you incorporate, right? 2002, you annex. 2005, you're rocked back to your infancy. And so even though you're the highest elevation on the coast, and even though you had approximately 50 homes that were permanently damaged from the flood, which other cities would love to say, you are still focusing on providing water and sewer and basic services to your citizens. That's 2005. But you're quicker than everybody else on the recovery. And so you get your feet back underneath you. 2007, the county says, we're going to raise taxes. We're going to raise the millage rate. And the city of Goche says, well, that stinks for our residents, and so we're going to reduce our millage if you're going to raise yours. And that's what the council did. But 2008, when that budget came into play, anybody here who is involved in the commercial market whatsoever can tell you what happened in 2008, because we still haven't recovered. And it happened the world over. That's right. We had the 1-2 hit, right? The 1-2 double bounce between the housing market crash and then in 2008, the commercial market crashed. And it fundamentally changed the landscape for everyone. And so the value of your millage was significantly reduced. 2002, you annex. 2005, Katrina hits. 2008, suddenly it's like in the middle of the night, someone came and took your savings, right? 2010, you have a council who came in and they're picking up these pieces and they're saying, we have an interstate, it's still zoned agricultural, we have all of this land that we know that we need to start providing services for and providing growth, and here are our limitations. Very little revenue, right? And so they did something almost as gutsy as what happened in 2008, and that is that they hired an engineer and got serious about infrastructure. And they recruited an economic developer from Fort Walton Beach. You see where this is going? So that was the year. 2010 was the year that we rezoned 1,303 acres. Now you're seeing all those stories I told you, all the community development, all the economic development. It's happened so fast. This saying, it is not only what we do, but it's also what we do not do for which we are accountable. We love your story. I have directors who you're about to meet. Any one of them could work anywhere. They are your neighbors. They have come to the city of Gautier because they want to be part of building exactly this. But when you see someone post on social media something negative about your town, we want you as stakeholders to take ownership over what you know your community to be, and we want you to tell them your story. Your story is Ocean Springs has $16.99 written on the water tank, and you're 29 years young. And in 29 years, you have been rocked several times. You have been rocked by major weather events. You have been rocked by the federal government. You have been rocked by an international recession, and yet you came back, you got your stuff together, and y'all are blowing and going right now. And I want you to know that for the last 3 years, you have won state awards for that. For the last 3 years, you have been recognized by the Mississippi Municipal League and the Mississippi Economic Development Council for all the huge gains that you're making. And so we want you to respond and claim your city and let people know what the story is in the city of Gautier. You let them know that your median income is higher than your neighboring cities, and you let them know that you're the highest elevation on the coast. You let them know that you're the second to highest traffic count on the coast. You let them know that this is a sound place to do business. To be bigger, we must first be what? I'm going to break real quick and tell you a story about Truett Cathy. Truett Cathy, I'm sure you all know, is the CEO of Chick-fil-A. Boston Market decided to go public with their chicken sandwich, and the people at Chick-fil-A were worried because Boston Market had a pretty good sandwich. And so they sat down with Truett Cathy and they said, what are we going to do? How are we going to compete with Boston Market? Because they've been pretty local, but our sales figures show us that when we go up against Boston Market in these local areas, we struggle. And so if they all of a sudden start growing, boy, we better grow even bigger than them, or else they're going to take us out. And everybody was really worried, right? They're going to steal our business. And Truett Cathy listened to this for a while, and he said, wait a minute. We are not going to grow bigger. We're going to get better. Because if we get better at what we do, the customer will demand our chicken sandwich, and they'll demand that we get bigger. So my story is, in the city of Gautier, we want to make sure that we don't repeat the problems that we had when we were the fastest growing city on the coast before Katrina, and we weren't ready. When we didn't have community development and we didn't know what we wanted, and so we pushed back. And when people would come in for a permit, you'd have entire neighborhoods show up and say, we don't want it. We don't know what we want, but we're nervous about that. We don't want that to happen again. We want everyone to know you know what you want. You know it because it's right here. And I also want you to say, and I've said it to the other groups, and I hope you hear me and I hope you share it, the city manager of Gautier has not had an original idea since she's got here. I'll say it again. Samantha Abel has not had an original idea since she's got here. Because what I'm doing is implementing your story. This is what you said you wanted. It's yours. We want you to take ownership of it. And when you hear people talk about Gautier's high crime and Gautier isn't a place to open a business, I want you to correct them and say, really? Because Lowe's sales are going up and up every single year. Jerry Lee's sales are doing great. Our retailers in our town center, every single one of them has invested and improved their facade. If you own a business in the city of Gautier, you are making a profit. We want you to share that story. Our commitment, our responsibility is that we have to get better so that we are ready when that growth comes. When somebody comes and says we need a preliminary plat or we need to redevelop this property, we're not sure about sprinklers, whatever the question may be, we need to make sure that we have the adequate training and the experience that we can address that growth when it comes. And so I'm going to talk to you a minute about accountability. I like this little cartoon. Don't worry if you don't know the rules. We're just kind of making it up as we go along. So, that's real fair. That makes you want to develop in a city, right? Stephen Covey, who wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, this is a saying from his book, accountability breeds responsibility. And so here we were as a younger city. When you're hired into a position and all of a sudden there's immense growth pressures and you're not exactly sure how to do your job, you do not stand on a mountaintop and say, I'm not sure what I'm doing. You just don't. And you don't share that with your coworkers generally either. You become insular. You hold that information in. And so what was happening in the city of Gautier is that if you were in the public works and you were mowing the right-of-way, when you got to a fire hydrant, what happened, Chief?
They go around it.
They go around because, hey, that's the fire department. That's their deal. That's their deal. We're the boat on the left. I'm so glad that problem is on your end. Because the boat's sinking, but only on one end, right? But it affects the whole boat. And so when people are holding information in, then there's no collaboration. There's no information exchanging. There's no cooperation between departments. Our police department wasn't talking to our fire department. Our fire department thought they were the stepchild. We had one department who is responsible for cutting your check. And if you have a grievance, they file it through the secretary to the civil service and they post your job description. So you might feel like you're not getting the best information if you have a problem. And so we've made some changes for transparency. We've made some changes to make sure that our employees are top performers, that they feel comfortable, and that they have the training and qualifications that they need to do the job. I like this one too. You've got a problem with avoiding personal accountability. Yeah, and whose fault's that? So that's kind of what we were looking at. When I came on board as city manager, my first request of the mayor and council was to allow me to create a position for the human resources director. Keep in mind, this is within our existing budget. And so Jason Pugh was the captain of administration in the police department. This is what I knew from being an economic development director and then being appointed in this position. I had the benefit of a little bit of experience. And I knew that if you go 7 years without an employee policy handbook, that's kind of tough. And let me tell you, that doesn't mean that it's not important, but when you're a brand new city, it's all important. Everything is happening at the same time. We're building a city from scratch. And so it's just about you get things done when you can. And so employees are trying to get job listings posted. They're trying to get the proper training. We have issues with risk management, with workers' compensation. And here's where I pause a minute and tell you that when I appointed my directors, of course I made sure they had the qualifications, right? You have a list of qualified candidates, but there's one word that came to my mind for each one of these positions before there was ever a face to that position. There was one word that I felt was critical to filling that position. And for the Human Resources Director, this was an extremely important position for me to be able to do my job. This was somebody who would make sure that everybody else was getting the training that they needed, that were being treated fairly. They could come to this person and ask them the same question 10 different ways and get the same answer every time. And so what I needed is somebody who was consistent. When I look at Jason, I see consistency. And that is incredibly valuable to me because What I do is I reach. You do not want somebody in my position. I am the executive branch. I'm the CEO. I'm the chief administrative officer. You don't want somebody to just park it and hang out, right? We're about growing and implementing your vision. So I need somebody who I can go to make sure that we're crossing our T's, we're dotting our I's. The first month that Jason was there, he saved the city $57,000 just by looking at our insurance carriers and making sure that we were doing things right. Since that time, I'm going to look to Jason to make sure I word this correctly. We have about $1.5 million more in assets being covered, right? And he has continued to save us money. And I look back at my staff reports, I believe last year it was like 80-something thousand that he saved us. So by having somebody whose full time and attention is focused on risk management, you can do things better and at a savings for your organization. I love this saying, and when I see this, I think of our police department every time. Holding someone else accountable is like trying to eat their lunch for them. Has anybody ever felt that way? Like, boy, if only they would hold themselves accountable, that would save us a lot of trouble, wouldn't it? And so what we practice is team accountability. My team holds me accountable. We hold each other accountable. I was close with Chief Eddie, our former police chief, and when he left, I had a decision to make, and it was just a couple weeks after I had made the appointment of Jason. And I knew I needed somebody who could hold the department accountable, because if your city manager is holding the police department accountable, we're in trouble. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Your police department has an inner fortitude, an integrity, and an honor that makes them sacrifice themselves in a way that I truly cannot fathom. And so I needed somebody who cared every bit as much as I did, and then more, and knew what it was to make that sacrifice, and would clean their own house, and would make sure that everybody was held to that extremely high standard that I myself cannot fathom but respect. And that's Chief Dante Elbin, who is also your neighbor. I know that you all know him. I know that you know his wife, who's a school teacher, and their beautiful children. And Chief Elbin is decisive. Because when Chief Elbin comes to my office, most of the time, our conversations go something like this. Okay, Chief. Because he's thought it out, and he knows what's best for his department, and he leads. Our comptroller is Miss Teresa Montgomery here. And probably all of you already know Miss Teresa, because she certainly is not new to the city of Goche. Miss Teresa, how long have you been with Goche? 15 years. Teresa has seen a lot as the city has grown. 29 years young, she's been with the city for half of our lifespan, right? Many of you know from reading headlines in years past that we have had issues with accounting. And that is because that one person, again, was in charge of all personnel, was in charge of all records keeping, was in charge of all accounting. That one department was in charge of an immense amount of stuff. And that's okay, because we were a young city. And so we're trying to get our feet underneath us. The same would be if you were building a community anywhere else and you had a limited number of people. And so with the same budget, we're making changes where we're deconstructing a cake so that we can see each layer and make sure that we have the proper ingredients. Does that make sense? And so Teresa, let me tell you, she is the reason why we all do this on a weekly basis. Because when we look at our budget reports, we need to know that the money that money is there. And oftentimes in our directors meeting, we'll do a drum roll, and all Teresa has to say is, "You're getting paid," and we all go, "Hooray!" And then that's about it. Because we know she knows those numbers, and so Teresa is dependable. Teresa shows up during Isaac. Teresa shows up on Saturdays. She is better than the post office. She's going to be there. Chief Robert Jones. So my husband is a retired firefighter. He's in the Air Force. My babies were both born into the fire department. That did not help me at all my first month on the job when I found out I was stepping into a mediation with the fire union, and they were mad as hornets. They did not care. And I was quite surprised. And it all boiled down to communication. It all boiled down to the fact that departments were not talking amongst themselves, right? And that there was a lack of accountability. And so when the time came when Chief Ray Frere retired and I had a decision to make, we started talking to some of the leaders in the fire union, and they didn't give me a name so much as they kept quoting the same person. They kept repeating themselves, and it was someone that they considered to be wise, someone they considered to be ethical, somebody who they had gone to their entire careers, and that's Robert Jones. So I brought Robert Jones into my office and I said, here's the deal. You, just like the other two directors, are already a leader. And so I could bring someone else in, but you're the leader de facto already. Some might see you as a threat. I'm excited. I want to give you the budget and see what you can do with it. Where are you, Chief? Chief kind of looked at me then the way he's looking at me now. Right. I said, great, thanks, because he knew what that budget looked like. And he picked it up and he led. And so I needed Chief Jones to have intuition, because we didn't have the luxury of sitting down in that volatile situation and flushing it out. I had to trust that that man was as wise as his fellow firefighters say he is, and that he could see a situation for what it was once I gave him all the information. When he had all that information, you know what he did with it? He shared it. He made sure that his captains had the information, his fellow firefighters had the information, and lo and behold, when people have information, they get with a team, don't they? They want to be part of it. And so here Chief Jones is with his Deputy Fire Chief, Derek McCoy, and here they are with our Government Week and our kids playing Jeopardy with our kids, teaching them about firefighting. Many of you know our Economic Development Planning Director, Chandra Nicholson. Chandra is known across the coast. I met Chandra under more difficult circumstances, and that is truly my favorite way to get to know someone, under tough times. You never get a better idea of someone's character. Chandra was the project manager on our streetscape project. And we had several issues, one of which was MDOT was doing a road project while we were waiting for our project to get off the ground. And I had a lot of questions of why things weren't happening at the speed and in the manner that I felt they should happen. And so I started calling neighboring cities and other places where Chandra had worked. And what I found out was Chandra's a company man, because the problem was internal, but I never heard it. Chandra smiles, Chandra works Saturdays, Chandra works weekends, and anybody who's ever worked with Chandra has said you can't outwork her. She is a workhorse. She has the highest reputation and respect on the coast, and there isn't an interstate or a town center that she has not touched. And it's become a little bit of a joke with our mayor and council, because whether they're asking her about a pier or a commercial project, she says, oh yeah, I can tell you about that. Either she's been involved with it, she's worked with somehow, because she is here. Her aunt is Trudy Dixon, Trudy Dixon in Pascagoula. She has deep ties on the coast, lives in Ocean Springs with her husband. And so that's exciting for us, because when you're the city of Goche, and like me, you're going to Bay St. Louis on Fridays, and you're going to Gulfport, and you're sitting and lunching with people, and people come up to you and say, where do you work? Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, the politics are awful there. Well, I can sit there and say, that's not been my experience. That happened when we were the fastest growing city. That happened before 2008. Those days are long gone. But when you have somebody with the caliber of the directors that we have here, Chief Elbin and the excellent relationship that he has with the county and how he's been able to have the county's canine training ground in the city of Goche, Chief Jones, who is able to utilize Biloxi and Gulfport's training programs for our guys, for them to get better training at a lower cost. And when you have Chandra Nicholson join your team, then it brings your city credibility. Because when your city only has a budget of $9.28 million and you have these people working for you, people think, man, something's going on over there. And something is, which is why we've been winning state awards. So Cindy Russell was actually one of the first people I met when I came to the city of Goche. I sat down at my desk the first day, I turned my monitor on, and there was only one file, and it said personnel. And I clicked on it, and there was a disciplinary action form for every single one of my employees. And in some cases, there were many. And I opened the first one, and the first sentence was this: the problem is not me, it's you. And so I closed the form, and as God is my witness, I didn't read another one, Because the problem was not that employee. The problem was whoever wrote up that disciplinary action form, right? Whoever wants to get a disciplinary action form like that, that's not going to help you correct your behavior. And so that's why my team was so demoralized. Because here they are without adequate training, so many growth pressures, and they're getting written up right and left. And what I'm seeing is my employees are going to Cindy Russell, and Cindy Russell is treating them as her own, as if she is their manager. She's giving them the information that they need. And so when it came time to make an appointment for city clerk, I appointed Cindy Russell because I know she already had everyone's trust. And there's nothing more important than trust when it's your job to hold all the records in the city and fulfill all public information requests and record the actions taken by council. Cindy is transparent because she has that trust. Chad Jordan, who couldn't be here with us this evening, he is an engineer. We all know in 2012 the city contracted out our public works and were able to make huge gains by negotiating in the labor for your clear water ion exchange, your sewer, so many public works projects that I'm not going to get into right now. One, because the evening is getting a little long and we're almost done, but two, because that's for the mayor's State of the City address. We're going to be talking a lot about those projects and projects moving forward. But what I want you to know about Chad is he's not a Johnny-come-lately. Chad was the engineer for the city on a number of projects, including your city park master plan that came, no lie, straight from here. City park master plan, it's what you said that you wanted. And again, it's in here. And so it was about a year ago that Chad called me and said, and he'd been working again as our public works director since 2012. And he called me and he said, Sam, I just want you to know I bought into this whole thing of yours. I bought into this whole teamwork, collaborate. I just want you to know this whole collaboration thing, I'm in. And we have a good laugh because he didn't know what he meant when he said that. Because this team, on a weekly basis, is helping each other figure out how to get their job done with what they have. And so you'll see them on Mondays after our directors meeting eating in the restaurants around the city together as a team, figuring out how they can get their week's tasks done by working together. And Chad is an instrumental part of that, whether he intended to be or not. He is a motivator. He keeps his team moving forward and helps us all figure out how to get the job done. This is our most recent hire, and this makes our family complete. This is our Cultural Services Director, Mr. Jeremy Timms, on the end here. Jeremy's in charge of all parks and recreation and all of our special events in the city. If you're building a community from scratch, this would probably not be your first hire, right? Your first hire would be someone like myself, and then you'd have your finance, your comptroller, and then you would have your HR director to make sure your hirings were doing right, they were getting paid, somebody's leading, right? But do you have a community if you don't have special events and parks and recreation? So it's an important position, isn't it? Because if you don't have these programs, then you have what we have had for so long, and we have our children playing in other cities. I knew Jeremy before I ever met him because I heard of him. Jeremy is, again, well known up and down the coast. He has worked on special projects for the IP. He was the what I would call an entertainment project manager. What would you call it, Jeremy? Yeah. He got jack of all trades. If anything needed to be built for any entertainment purpose whatsoever, he got it done. He has experience both on the private sector side under construction management, also working for huge venues. And so when someone like Jeremy Timms comes and works for you, you now have a MacGyver. That's what you got. That's the word. I need a MacGyver because he has very little budget, but with toothpicks and duct tape, he can make something fly. And that's what you need. And I love when I bring Jeremy places because people recognize and they see him coming and their face is always like this, oh, that guy. Because they know two things. They know, number one, he's going to ask him for something, and number two, they're going to give it to him. And that's what we need, right? So that's our team. Here's our city attorney, Josh Danis, who is appointed just as I am, serves directly under the mayor and council, and also our judge, Jason Thornton. Instrumental to our team because we have to admit when we don't know things, right? That's important. And these two make sure that we're doing things right. Josh, I have a standing meeting with him every Tuesday at 10. My directors know it. If they have issues come up throughout the week, They know that they can get with